Odeta Barbulushi, Counselor of Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama. Albania and North Macedonia started this year the negotiation process with European Union, first intergovernmental conferences this July. How much Albania is ready for negotiation? Because we were waiting for so much time, so long time to open the clusters and to open the negotiations with EU. What about your compliance with European legislation?
Well, indeed, like you said, we have been waiting for a long time for this moment, and finally we received the positive decision of the Council to start the negotiations with the European Union, both North Macedonia and Albania. And in a way, that is the summit of our attempts, of our efforts of many years for North Macedonia, more than Albania, but both countries have been waiting at least, I would say, since 2020, when we had a very clear decision of the EU Council to open the negotiations. And in terms of preparation, we started what we called a pre-screening process since 2018, when the European Commission gave the okay or the green light, recommended, in fact, indeed, the opening of accession negotiations for our countries, and it was also tasked by the Council to start preparation on what is called a pre-screening exercise with us. And that in itself, as an exercise, helped our teams prepare, but also anticipate what was coming. And particularly for chapters 23, 24, that was the focus of that pre-screening exercise. It prepared our team for the approximation of the legislation in these key areas. I would say that both our countries in the past few years have gone through very challenging moments and have taken upon themselves quite some challenging tasks, or have taken upon themselves some, even I would say, sacrifices in order to come to this moment of sitting at the table and starting negotiations with the European Union. Of course, in the case of North Macedonia, it was the Prespa agreement first. For us, one of the main challenges and the main reforms that we went through was the judiciary reform in years 2016, 2017, when we passed the package of main legislation and subsidiary legislation, which meant amendments to the constitution to make possible that we change the entire architecture of the judiciary in the country. So, in that sense, the opening of accession negotiations is both, I would say, a recognition of our efforts, but is also the start of a process which will not be easy, which will not be any easier than what we're leaving behind. But it will be, I expect it would be long, and will also present us with new challenges from one step to the other. Now we are at the stage of screening, and for Albania, the screening of the first cluster should finish in January 2023. And the calendar also anticipates, or according to the calendar we have, is that the screening of other chapters, of other clusters, will finish by November next year, which is quite ambitious and has indeed mobilized our administration.
Do you have ready teams, and who is in charge, who is leading the negotiations with you?
We have, in September, we already nominated a chief negotiator who is leading the process and is leading the teams. And I think with the new methodology, we have also been exploring how, or exploring the possibilities of working more according to the clusters, not just on individual chapters, as the old methodology was, but now working primarily on the clusters, because this is how we will organize our work and negotiations. I think for the public administration, this is a very huge but important test and trial. So in itself, the way we see the process of EU integration is that, in fact, it will strengthen our administrative capacities, and it will also make our reforms more resilient. And I think this is one of the main challenges, particularly when it comes to the first cluster, which the focus of which is rule of law, fundamental rights, security, organized crime, anti-corruption. These are areas which in a way are the core or the heart of democratization and of our reform path. So I think even though it will be long and challenging, this process is very important for the strengthening of our institutions and for anchoring our countries in the EU perspective path and in strengthening our administrative capacities as well.
Yes, Macedonian government has a goal, very ambitious plan for North Macedonia to become a member state of European Union till 2030. What about official Tirana? Do you have some kind of a goal, maybe year?
I must admit it is difficult to speak of a date, even though it is. It can be encouraging, or it can mobilize. It can help to mobilize the public administration and the public opinion. But it can also be difficult. It can have the counter effect of actually not being able to commit to that date, as far as this process is not only one-sided. It's not only North Macedonia or Albania, and it's not even just the government who are responsible for completing successfully the process. So it's very much related also to politics among EU member states, politics even sometimes among different branches within the EU. We speak of the Commission, of EU Council, and as we've also seen in the past, despite or in addition to complying to all the conditions that the EU Commission presents the countries with, the candidate countries, very often it has been up to a political decision of EU member states, or up to a political moment as well, to decide for the opening of negotiations. And I don't see that will be different, even with the opening or the closing of the clusters. And North Macedonia knows one or two things about political reasons,
yes,
I
of
suppose.
Course. What do you think about the new methodology? It will speed up or slow down the process, because we have reversibility, we have the first cluster who opens and closes at the end of the process, and etc., etc. We have changes.
The new methodology, I would say, has the merit of focusing on the first cluster and on the reforms related to rule of law and to democratic governance. And I think in that respect it has aimed to make, or to help the countries and the institutions make the reforms irreversible. So it has introduced this element of reversibility on, when the process, or if there is any lapse, or if there is any of the countries sort of sliding back, then the process will stop. And that in itself, in retrospect, I think that's a very positive aspect, because we have seen in the past that EU accession or the negotiations process have sort of lost their power, have lost their leverage. The EU has also lost its leverage, because the opening of chapters and the closing of chapters did not quite correspond to what was happening on the ground in terms of the quality of reforms. So I think in that sense it's very good. But going back to your concrete question, whether it will delay or fasten the process, I think it presents our countries and our public administration with more challenges. So that makes it, I think, difficult to predict when will the negotiation process finish. And I think here there are three key challenges which were there before the new methodology, but have become even more important, I think, to tackle with the new methodology. One is resilience and irreversibility of our reforms and the anchoring of our countries in the reform path. The second is the fact that it's not just governments who are responsible for the completion of the process. So you need all actors of the society, no less civil society, but also no less the opposition and all the other political actors to be on board and to be, if not in a unified front, to help and contribute to the reform path so that the countries can complete this process. The third, I think, very important challenge is to keep the public opinion interested and ideally enthusiastic about the process. Now, Albania is a bit different from the rest of the Western Balkans because the population and the citizens are quite enthusiastic. The enthusiasm rate is still over 90% about EU accession. But if there are big delays, citizens will start again asking, what does this mean? What the opening of negotiations mean? So I think it is a challenge of communication, both for the EU and for us, the national governments, but at the same time is a challenge of showing tangible results of what the EU means on the ground. And that means both in terms of economy, yes, like what the opening of negotiations mean in practical economic terms, how the economic investment plan of the European Union is implemented on the ground, but also whether and how our countries can be made part of the joint EU responses to the current security crisis, current energy crisis, and other crises that our citizens are faced with. Yes. So they feel, how to say, the European Union on their daily basis, and that is, I think, very important. The second component of that is that the citizens feel that the EU is also more present politically. And in that connection, we are hosting in Tirana in the first week of December the first EU and Western Balkan Summit, which I think sends a very strong and positive signal on the part of the EU to the region, that for the first time all leaders of the European Union are coming to the region to hold the summit. And I think we need to see more and more of those gestures for the Western Balkans to engage more meaningfully, both at the political and economic level with the European Union, so that the citizens feel that this moment actually meant something, in addition to the individual accession or negotiation process.
Yes. Macedonia and Albania were blocked for 2 years to start the negotiation process. It was because of the Bulgarian veto. The last visit of Prime Minister Rama, he said that it's not supposed to be difficult to open the Macedonian constitution and to put the Bulgarians in it. But in the last couple of years here in the country, the public is all the time listening of that kind of comments for opening the constitution to start negotiation process and etc. etc. And they are perceiving that kind of messages like pressure. What do you think? What was the main message of your Prime Minister?
I think Prime Minister Rama has been very clear, in fact, yes, in denouncing and being very critical, yes, on the Bulgarian veto. Yes. Not only because it was one member state, one neighbor, one new member state, which had a stake in this process, but also because it sort of created precedent that bilateral issues can and would in the future block the process of accession negotiations for countries, for candidate countries. And I think Prime Minister Rama has been very, very open and explicit on this. And I think for us, in our view, it was quite unfair, in fact, that after the Council decision in 2020, after Prespa agreement 2018, we were at the position that, again, North Macedonia was blocked by a member state to proceed with the opening of accession negotiations. At the same time, it's quite understandable that the public opinion can be wearisome of, how to say, frequent requests or pressure that seems sometimes to be taken from the outside or brought in by the EU member states or by the EU to make constant changes. But this is a process which in many ways will require sacrifices by all of us.
Yes. Open Balkan is an initiative that awakens different opinions here in the region. Is there a future for this initiative? I'm talking about because we have now some kind of difficult relations between Serbia and Kosovo, and also the relations between Belgrade and Moscow. Do we have a future with this initiative, Open Balkan?
Well, I would say the Open Balkans has a present, which means it is working on the ground to bring some benefits to the economies and to bring some, easier access to businesses, but also has, through the number of agreements we have signed, we have made it easier also for mobility and for trade conditions among our countries. So in that sense, it is an initiative which has contributed to the implementation of a larger plan, of a broader plan, which is the implementation of common regional market. And the two processes need not be contradictory or not be counterposed to each other. And this is a discussion we have at the political but also at the experts level. It's very good that we have different initiatives of regional cooperation. I think the EU too can encourage and call for more regional cooperation among us.
What do you think about the European political community?
The Albanian government, Albanian Prime Minister, has been one of the very first, or the very first one from the region to support the idea of European political community, despite all skepticism and questions that were at the time when President Macron launched the idea. And the reason behind that was that we saw the European political community as an opportunity for enhanced cooperation and political engagement of the European Union with the Western Balkans. In fact, if we go back and look in retrospect, we only had one political platform between the EU and the Western Balkans as a region, and that was the Berlin Process, which was launched in 2014. And that was indeed as a platform which would bridge the relations, let's say, between the EU and the Western Balkans since the Thessaloniki summit. Yes. And that was born at a point when there was skepticism in the EU and indeed even among the EU institutions for further enlargement. There was a fatigue for further enlargement. Now we are in a completely different moment. The war in Ukraine has been indeed a watershed moment for European security. There is awareness among Europeans that we need to engage more with the Western Balkans, but not only, also with other European nations that can shoulder in and contribute to European security. So in that sense, EPC was a very good opportunity indeed to bring different countries and different nations of Europe to the table, and discuss questions of common concern. It was not a gathering around, let's say, European norms or European values or even European accession, but it was a meeting and discussions organized along common themes and common issues of concern, like energy, like other more sort of traditional security concerns, migration and other issues which are of common importance. So in that sense, we see the contribution of this platform to bring us to the table and help us have our voice and have our suggestions, our ideas injected and part of the European policy agenda. And we very much hope that this will continue and build a sustainable platform, not one thing which is one-off, one summit only and everything will be forgotten, but will be continued. The fact that the two other presidencies of EPC will be held by Moldova and Sweden, I think it's very important, sends very important message to all of us. We'll have a country which is now a candidate status, but not a EU member state, and to a EU member state. And we'll see how the agenda will be shaped, again, taking into consideration the common security challenges for all of us.
Yes. You mentioned the EU summit in December. Tirana will be the host. Do you prepare for the summit, and what will be the main message from there?
Yes, we indeed have the summit which will be organized in Tirana on the 6th. It's, like I said before, it's a very good positive signal that the EU sends that the summit is held in a Western Balkans country, and it gives the whole region, not only Albania, a new visibility, I would say. The topics and the themes which will be discussed and will be part of the deliverables and also of the Tirana Declaration are indeed themes which have been discussed for the past couple of weeks by the EU member states, and they resolve around, again, issues of energy security, the importance of EU accession, regional cooperation, but also the implementation of economic investment plan, and also some of other issues which are of special importance to the member states. I think one message which will be a key takeaway of this summit is that we in the region have some common concerns and some joint ideas that we want to bring to the table and to contribute to the policy agenda of the EU, so that we can become part of the common European responses to the current crisis and can be indeed active players, not just passive players in the discussion.
Yes. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.